Good afternoon from Indonesia, Prof. Naser.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you? Are you in Melbourne?
Yes, I'm based in Melbourne, and I'm sorry that I'm a few minutes late. I was trying to find the link for the Zoom meeting.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Are you based in Jakarta or?
No, I'm in Surabaya.
Okay. How far is from Jakarta? Because I've been in Jakarta, but not other parts of Indonesia.
It's on the other side, like from edge to edge of the island.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Today, we still have 20 people signing up for the discussions, but maybe more will come a bit later on.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to have discussion with us, sir. My name is Faricha. Maybe because before we get into the discussion, I'd like to introduce Dr. Naser to today's participant. Selamat datang juga untuk teman-teman. Sini saya akan menggunakan bahasa Inggris ya dalam diskusi ini. Dr. Naser Ghobadzadeh is a senior lecturer at the National School of Arts, Australian Catholic University. His area of expertise includes political Islam, Iranian politics, Islamic political thought, state-religion relation, and Middle East politics. One of his books is Religious Secularity, a Theological Challenge to the Islamic State, published by Oxford University Press in 2015. Today with Dr. Naser, we will discuss about Islamic political theology. To everyone who wishes to ask questions, you can do so by using the raise hand feature or type your question in the chat section. Dr. Naser, first, I'd like to mention that scholars or researchers of Islam is familiar with the term theology in studying Islamic thought. And scholars have been arguing that politics in Islam itself is one with the religion, since Islam rules every aspect in Muslim life. And that Islam has different experience, unlike the West, between the state and the church regarding the separation of religion and the state. Even more widely used is the term political Islam or Islam politics. Even many argue that Islam and politics is one body, that the formation of theology in Islam itself is political. Perhaps we should start with the term that Dr. Naser also wrote in his article, Democratization of Islamic Political Theology. Dr. Naser, my starting questions are, what is actually an Islamic political theology, and what important aspects that we must look to find the political in Islamic theology?
Yeah, thanks, Faricha, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for attending this meeting. I hope that my presence in your meeting will be fruitful, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts as well, to learn from all of you in this 1 hour time that we have. Let me start first with clarifying, before talking about the political theology, Islamic political theology, about a general misunderstanding or misconception about Islam and politics relationship, or the understanding that Islam is a political religion in contrast or with for example, Christianity, which is apparently the claim is that it is not political, or it is not political as much as Islam is. Look, there is a confusion between the concept of politics and Islam. So politics and the state, sorry. Particularly Abdullah An-Naim, a Sudanese scholar, talks about this, that if we take into consideration that there is a difference between the institution of the state and politics. Politics is a general concept talking about the power relations, about the ways of managing society, and it is much more. It includes much more wide area than focusing on the specifically institution of the state. So two sides of the debate makes these mistakes, because those radical Islamists who claim that Islam is political, so it means that we need to form an Islamic state, is somehow misleading, because it doesn't mean that Islam should be integrated or should be a part of the institution of the state. Of course, Islam is political. In that meaning, Christianity is political as well. Nowadays, we see that how different discussions, different debates, different issues are linked to the religion, to the religious moral values, moral principles of Christianity. Like take the issue of abortion right now in the US, which there are lots of religious aspects to the debate, which is a political issue, but it is linked to the religion as well. And the same goes with the Islam as well. Islam is political in the meaning that, of course, its moral values, its principles is related to the way that we manage the public sphere. We make the collective decisions in the public sphere, but it doesn't mean that the state as an institution should be controlled by, for example, religious authorities or religious establishment. So that's the first clarification I thought that it's necessary to make, the distinction between politics and state. Okay, coming back to your question about the political theology, again, every religion has got political theology. Every religion has got some saying about the politics, the way that the life should be, the collective life, the community should be managed. And that's in that aspect, Islam is not an exception. One, again, issue which makes some sort of confusion or misunderstanding is that at the early stages of Islamic history, particularly during the Prophet Muhammad and the fourth rightful caliphs, it was the case that the both religious institution and state institution were somehow converged. They were merged because Prophet Muhammad was the political authority. At the same time, he was the highest religious authority as well. It was the same somehow for the four rightful caliphs, because they were religiously respected. They had religious authority, but at the same time, there were political leaders as well. But after the fourth rightful caliphs, particularly with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, there is a divergence, there is a distinction between religious authority and political authority, because caliphs is a political authority. It has got symbolic religious role, but it doesn't have religious authority. Religious authority is transferred to the ulama from the first century afterwards. So that exceptional early stages of early initial centuries of the Islamic history should not be somehow generalized to the whole history of the Islam. I will stop to let you have ask more questions. So.
Okay, thank you. I think my question here also would be, how do we actually treat or analyze the political theology in Islam?
Again, I mean, there are different sources. Obviously, for the main sources for Shia is, for Islam generally, is the Quran, the scripture, the main scripture, along with the hadith, which is the sayings and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad for the majority of the Muslims, which are the Sunnis. And for Shias, there are 12 infallibles as well. Their sayings and their deeds, their actions are a part of the sacred text as well. So one thing is that you delve into these resources along with the Islamic history as well. Of course, the history gives us examples, the patterns that have been practiced, particularly in the initial centuries of the Islam, when there was a Prophet Muhammad, and for Shiites, infallible imams. So those are the sources. But the problem is that, or there are two approaches. I mean, let's talk about those approaches, and then we can come back to the problems that aroses from those two approaches. One approach is that we read this scripture and the Islamic history in a literalistic way, as a text, as the text tells us. So whatever that the text says, we need to practice that text exactly, or to imply that text exactly. The second approach is to look into the maqasid, or to the intentions, to the ways of understanding why that text within that context, that historical context, at a specific time and specific place in the history of Islam, for what reason that text was revealed. That text could be a verses from the Quran, that the text could be a hadith from Prophet Muhammad, or an action by Prophet Muhammad, or for Shiites by infallible imams. When we think about the maqasid, the intention, the meaning behind what literally has been said or has been written, then the things change. Then in that case, we see that the main principle in Islam is justice. So, for example, we could read the text literally by saying that, for example, treating women in this way was something that Prophet Muhammad did. So we are copying that is exactly what Prophet Muhammad did, and we apply it to this current time, which is 14 centuries after that time. But when we look to the context, what happened within that context, what Prophet Muhammad was doing was somehow within that specific time and space, the place that he was living, then our approach will be totally different. We will get the essence of the religion. We will get the main message of the religion, which I think that everybody agrees is somehow justice is at the center of this message. What the Islam is for is justice, and justice is not I mean, the manifestation of justice is not fixed. I mean, for example, if it was just back then in the 14 centuries ago to treat someone in this way, obviously the situation has changed, and we cannot say that it is still just to treat that person or that race or whatever in the same way. Let me give you a clear example: slavery. We have slavery in Islam. It is something that is not forbidden in Islam. But right now, nobody would be able to make an argument to say that slavery is justice. It doesn't violate the right of the person. It doesn't violate the dignity of the human being. So what I'm trying to say is that even those radical fundamentalist Islamic Muslim scholars or jihadists, Salafists, they even pick specific aspects of the religion that suits their needs, and they're into what they want to do. They find justification within the scripture or within the Islamic history.
Okay, interesting. I'm actually quite intrigued with your article, Democratization of Islamic Political Theology. It's more into the Iranian politics, right? But also in your book, Religious Secularity, you mentioned that the making of Islamic State in today's world is quite difficult to make one, because even the political party that bring the identity of Islam itself cannot work together. And that in the wake of 9/11 and other terrorist groups, Islam has been demonized. And that it seems like it's actually totally impossible to make a new Islamic state. But also, when you mentioned in your article, Iran could do that. Why the rest of the world cannot? Or that they simply choose to stand with what today's politics able to offer them to make the country, not, let's say, for Muslim majority country, they are not pointed out as a more radical Muslim.
Look, I think whenever that, I would highly advise this to all of you as well. Whenever we talk about the political phenomena, what's happening, of course, one approach is to look to the look to the sources that those who are, I mean, in charge of that political phenomena are using or are referring to justify, to explain what they are doing. For example, in the case of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini led a revolution and established an Islamic state, and his main sources were references to Quran, were references to the Shiite history. That's one part that we need to engage with and see that how he's making a case. I mean, Khomeini is just an example of, but let's take bin Laden, who did a specific kind of actions, which was, I mean, like terrorist acts, as we all, I think, agree on that. And then the one part is to look bin Laden's justifications, what kind of sources he uses, what kind of, which verses in the Quran he refers to. But I think more important than that, to engaging with that sources that he uses, is to see that what are the political contexts within which bin Laden is emerged and he's doing what he's doing. Okay, that's more important, I personally believe, because that tells us that how he has got to the place, or he has got to the actions, he has reached to the conclusions that he is promoting this kind of action or this kind of politics at a specific time and a specific place. So we can engage with that source. I think the other thing, as I said, is the political, social, economic context. This is the general advice that I would have. But talking about specifically Iran, I think Ayatollah Khomeini's action and his political theology was more product of his time and his place and his lived experience, as well as the lived experience of the millions of Iranians who were suffering from the dictatorship, who were suffering from a top-down secularization projects, which was, I mean, we could talk about it, that how all, even at the scholarly academic level, the idea was that the whole world is moving towards becoming a secular person, secular community, secular society. So that was the idea, that as much as we modernize, then we will move towards secularization. We will push religion to the private sphere, and from there, religion will disappear eventually. That was experienced somehow, that conceptualized, articulated by scholars in the West, and in the Muslim world, it was an imported idea. Imported in the meaning that the leaders of Muslim worlds back then, or like in Iran, Muhammad Reza Shah and Reza Shah before that, his father, they looked to this model and said, okay, instead of waiting for this project to evolve by itself, to happen by itself, we can push it. We can somehow adopt a specific set of programs to accelerate the process of modernization, and at the same time, the process of pushing the religion into the private sphere, shrinking religion to the private sphere, and eliminating religion from the public, and eventually from even individual life. So that kind of approach created a backlash. Now we, even in the West, we have come to the conclusion that religion is not going to go away. Religion is not going to disappear. Even in the Western context, now I live in, for example, in Australia, every street that you go, the main spot of the street belongs to the church. You know that the church is still in the world, is the most wealthy institution in the world, the Catholic Church, because of the land that they have. So it is almost, I don't know, centuries, 5 centuries that we have secularization project in the West, but religion has not disappeared. Has it? No. So it's not going to happen. But what happened in that context, and the whole Islamism, jihadism, Salafism, all these different versions of Islamic movements are a sort of backlashes to that kind of policies of top-down secularization project. Iran was not an exception. In Iran, for 7 decades, almost 70 years, there was top-down secularization project. I don't know, you may have heard that there was a compulsory removal of hijab, scarf in Iran in 1930s. When they were in the streets, police would stop a woman who were wearing hijab, would remove their hijab, but forcefully, because the idea was that we are modernizing, we are going to go towards modernization and leave religion behind. So Khomeini and the rise of Shi'i political Islam or Shi'i state-centric Islam was a backlash to that kind of secularization projects. And that backlash emerged because people were thinking that, okay, we are losing everything. We are losing our religion. We are losing our identity. And of course, religion is important for people. So that's why Khomeini managed to mobilize a huge number of Iranians, both at the mass level and at the intellectual level, at the elite level as well, because even the left parties like communists and socialists joined Khomeini in his urge to topple down this top-down secularization state, which was promoting top-down secularization project. But again, that's one aspect of this phenomena that we call our Iranian Islamic State. So we look to the history, we look to the context in terms of the political context, political background, what the state did, what the opposition groups did, and what emerged out of it. The other aspect is how we see Khomeini justified, what kind of language Khomeini used, what kind of discourses Khomeini created, formed to revolt and to form an Islamic state. So if we look to Khomeini's thinking, Khomeini's sources that he used, you will come across, you will be surprised that Khomeini was a very exception in the Shia history. Look, Shia's political theology is very somehow simple. When Prophet Muhammad died, a group of Muslims, minority of course, believed that Prophet's son-in-law and cousin, Imam Ali, the 4th Caliph, you know him as 4th Caliph, and Shias know him as the first saint, first infallible Imam. A minority group believed that he is the one who has to succeed Prophet Muhammad. And the idea was that he is appointed by the God, as Prophet Muhammad was appointed by the God. Of course, we know that the history of Islam formed in a different way, not the way that she believed or they pushed for. So what happened during the first 3 centuries of the Islamic history? Shia always lost within the political struggle. So except Imam Ali, who was the 4th Caliph for just 5 years, as you may know, from the 556 up to the 655 to 661, none of the other 12 infallible Imams succeeded in forming any state. None of them succeeded in taking the position of the caliphs. So, and when Imam Ali was assassinated, his son claimed the caliphate for just 7 months. Okay, and after 7 months, he agreed with Muawiyah for Muawiyah to be the caliphs, and he somehow surrendered to Muawiyah, to the Umayyad empire. Excuse me. So
yeah.
This happened in the first century of the Islamic history, and from that time up until 1979, for more than 13 centuries, there was no any religious authority within the Shiite history who made an argument to be the position, to be the caliph, or made any action. So they didn't take any action. And it was somehow, and after the 4th century, I've discussed this in the another book, which is just will be published before the end of the year this year, with more details. If you are interested, I can send you the link when it is published. In the 4th century, in the Shiite political theology, the idea was embedded that the position of the rulership is preserved for the 12th Imam, a specific person, which is a messianic feature, a messianic character in the Shia Islam. And the idea is that he disappeared in 941 and he is still alive, and he will come back one day to form a just government. That's the whole political theology of 12er Shia. So what happened in the 4th century, it was embedded in the religion of Shiism that rulership position exclusively belong to the specific person, and that person is a messianic figure, 12th Imam Mahdi, who will rise up at a given time in the future, and we don't know when. It depends on the God's will. Whenever that God's orders, he will rise up again. And from that time, Shia believed that we shouldn't seize the state institution. Of course, Shia has always been political. Shia and Shia leaders, religious establishment has always engaged in politics throughout the history, but they have never made any effort to seize the state institution. So, for example, I'll give you one of the examples that I have discussed in that article is the Akhund Khorasani, which I'm sure that you have read in that article, that they actively contributed to the constitutional revolution, which happened from the 906 to 911 in Iran. Ulama, the clerics, were a part of that revolution in early 20th century. But they were not. They didn't intend to seize the state institution. So they were active in politics, but as a part of somehow civil society. So we have many civil society institutions right now, organizations like NGOs throughout the world, and they are engaged in politics, of course. They are promoting for their cause, whatever is that. If it could be like animal rights, it could be women's rights or whatever, but they are not political parties. The difference between political party and civil society or NGOs is that political party is engaged in politics with the intention, with the aim of seizing power, with the aim of forming a government, being in charge of the state apparatus, state institution. But those who are active in the civil society or acting as an NGO, their ultimate goal is not to rule. Their ultimate goal is not to take over the state institution. And religion, at least in the Shia context for 14 centuries, has always been active in politics, but as a part of civil society, not as a part of, not as a political party which intends to seize power and to take over the state institution. But Khomeini was an exception. And the way that he talks about the political theology is is very exceptional. If you read his book, which I highly recommend if you have time to read, it is fortunately translated to English. I don't know if there is a translation in Indonesian language or not, but if it's available in English language, if you read the book, you will see that there are very, very, how could I say, minimum references to the Quran, minimum references to the Shia hadith. It is more political argument. It is more using a kind of reasoning, a kind of rationality to justify forming Islamic State. Again, I have discussed this in one of chapters of my next book, which is, if you are interested, again, I can recommend you when it is published.
Thank you, Dr. Naser. Perhaps another participant would like to ask. You can turn on your cam and directly ask. Okay, from Madani, you may ask your question.
Okay. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining our discussion, Mr. Naser. So it is very interesting about Shiites, you know, because the Shiites in Indonesia is persecuted in several places. You know, some of them are exiled from Sampang, and now they live in Sidoarjo, if I'm not mistaken. So you said that after Prophet Muhammad passed away, the religious authority came to ulama, not umaro. But isn't umaro in early Muslim decades were also ulama, sir?
You mean caliphs were ulamas as well, you mean?
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, for example, if you look back to the early history of Islam, Umar ibn Khattab or Uthman or Imam Ali or Abu Bakr, their ideas, their understanding of religion were considered as a sort of authoritative because they were close companions of the Prophet Muhammad. They were in the position of somehow being perceived as a person who understands religion better than the others. But from the Muawiyah, the first Muawiyah the first, it all changes. Muawiyah didn't have the religious authority. He was not a religious. He didn't have a religious knowledge somehow to have religious authority. From that time, we have eventually, particularly from the 2nd century onwards, there is different schools of jurisprudential schools like Hanafi, Maliki, Hanbali. They are the ones who become the religious authorities. Caliphs is not somebody who would issue fatwas. It is more ulamas who are in charge of religious issues, religious matters. If people have questions about the religious issues, they approach to the religious authorities, to the ulamas, not caliphs. Caliphs, of course, is in command of like appointing judge, even supporting ulamas or suppressing them, but that's more political position that he's holding. Particularly when Boyets emerged in the 4th century. Afterwards, caliphs was reduced completely to a symbolic role. Even in terms of the issues of military or issues of politics, caliph didn't have much saying because they lost most of their powers. And much earlier, there are different sources which discussed in details about this, how they lost their religious authorities much earlier than losing their military or political authority to the different Mamluks which emerged eventually in the Islamic history.
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
From Madani, Reza, do you have Any question? Okay, now we have Ikhwanul Ma'arif Harahap. You open your cam.
Okay, thank you Farika, and thank you Mr. Naser. I'm scholar postgraduate political science of University of Indonesia, and my classroom with my lecturer, we
What happened?
Ikhwanul Ma'arif, are we still connected? Perhaps if the connection is disturbed, you can turn off the cam and just use the audio. First, we would like to move to another question first. While waiting him for the connection to come back. So Yusuf Habibi asked that he is interested in the administrative system in Iran. He asked, do they only do religious activities in all aspects, or do they really provide good service to their citizens? Because this is what can counter the Western accusation against Islam, which is more political. That's his question.
Sorry, I didn't get what the question is.
Okay, he asked, does in Iran, do they only do the administration? Do they only do religious activities, or like turning everything into more religious in all aspects, or do they really provide good service to their citizens? Because he sees that if what Iran did really give a good service to their citizens, this can counter the Western accusation against Islam, particularly in Iran.
Yeah, I mean, it's if I understand your question is related to the good governance. If we can say that Iranian government is capable of delivering to the people's need, it is a bit complicated. The first thing is that obviously Iran is a rich country because of the oil and other resources. The state is privileged because of having access to this all resources, particularly oil revenue, that which they use for different reasons. Iran's economy is not doing well. Of course, we should take into the consideration that over the last 4 decades, more than 4 decades, Iran has been under sanctions. And the imperialistic approach of particularly the US in particular and the West to somehow cripple the efforts of any efforts which is takes place outside of their the world order that they want to have is problematic for them, and it creates problems. They create lots of hurdles for them to even have the normal life. And that's what has happened in Iran right after the revolution. Iran was engaged in war, which is nowadays, it's very well documented that the US was supporting Saddam back then against Iran, and again at the same time the sanctions and all those problems. And that's why I believe that there are lots of problems in Iran. I mean, in terms of the good governance. But at the same time, I would say that if you compare with the other countries, like what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq, what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in Libya, and every country which has not been in good term with the US in a specific time in their history have suffered a lot. And if you compare with those countries, then you would say that, of course, Iran is in much better position. But the main problem in Iran, I think, of course, there are economic problems, difficulties for the people, but more important than that is that people are not happy. If you go to Iran, you will see that the economy is not as bad as the people think. For example, the level of the wealth, if you go to the houses in Iran, I have friends here who have been in Iran, and they say that the houses looks like a palace because they spend lots of money to decorating their houses. But people are not happy. And of course, there are difficulties. I'm not denying that there are difficulties. And the problem is that the government has not been able to somehow convince the nation, the significant part of the people, which that we are doing good. I mean, of course, they are not doing absolutely good. There are many problems, particularly with the corruptions and all those things. But again, as I said, it's again important to think within the context. The context that Iran is placed within is somehow in the what they call themselves as the resistance camp. They are not going along with the international order, the world order, and that comes with the consequences. So if you ask me or someone that, okay, why to resist the world order? So there will be different ideas. Some people would say that, okay, we should resist, even if we are paying price for that, because this is imperialistic approach. This is not fair. This is not acceptable. But some would say that, okay, I don't care if it's fair or if it's about justice. I want to go on with my life. I don't care if, for example, what is done in Afghanistan right now, that everybody see that after 20 years, what costs, what price Afghan people are paying for just simply wrong policy by the US. Okay, so that could be a different approaches, but again, coming back to the case of Iran, if we see Iran within that context, saying that, okay, if they have decided to resist, if they have decided not to be a part of the world order, which is not just, which is not fair, then they are paying the price. Of course, they are paying the price. But the other states who have resisted the world order, they have paid much more higher price. And that's where you can say that Iran is doing well. But at the same time, in terms of the good governance, as I said, there are many problems like corruption, like Iranian passports is not, with the Iranian passport, you cannot travel anywhere. I mean, it's very hard to get visa for the other countries. People are suffering a lot. People are paying high price. And the last point that I could make about this is that right now in Iran, there is a big gap between what people want, the majority of people, of course, we can say from the different elections and their outcomes, and what its leaders want. The leaders, which are a group of people who were a part of revolution in 1979, they are still, at least the supreme leader and conservatives, they still believe in resisting. They still believe in not joining the international world order, at the same time paying the price. But the majority of people no longer are happy with paying price for not being a part of the international order or to resist for the independence and all those sorts of things.
All right. I hope that answers for Yusuf Habibi, or you can type your response in the chat section. And we have a question from Ubaidillah Masrur. He asked, during the Abbasid period, the relationship between the ulama and the Umara was strained. But from this strained relationship, various kinds of progress were formed and created an era called the Golden Age. Is the choice to separate from the government the right one, or should they go back to the time of Khulafa Rashidin?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think, and I think it tells us that how when the state is not only separated from the religious authorities, ulamas, but also creates a space for ulama to do whatever, to do their works. So within that context, the golden age of Abbasid time, of course, in the political line, in the economic line, in the military even aspects of the government were doing good, and they let the ulama do their job as well. And there was no specific version of understanding of religion that the state was pushing for that. There was a sort of the tolerance within the have a different kinds of ideas, different kinds of understanding of religion. And that's why the Islamic age in that time, science and even within the jurisprudential framework, it was a sort of flourishing time. It was that's why it is called as a golden age. And I think considering again, looking to the history, we shouldn't look for a sort of a role model, a sort of a blueprint to take from the history and paste it, or to copy and paste it in the current time. So with what we started this conversation at the beginning about the literalistic reading of the history, or interpreting and seeing how what kind of messages we can get, I would say that we shouldn't think of copying Abbasid, nor copying early stages of the Islamic history, like Khulafa Rashidun, rightful caliphs of the early stages. They had their own time, and maybe they did great at their own time, but that doesn't mean that it will work in the same way right now. So what we need to take from these experiences is to see that what was the reason that they succeeded, how they implemented the core messages of Islam, which is, as I stated earlier, is justice, to give spaces for everybody to feel, to have a fair share of the life, fair share of whatever that they want, if they want to have their own interpretation, their own understanding of the religion. So the main point is to take these core messages, to see what was the reasons behind their successes, instead of trying to copy their model and implement it in the modern era, which I strongly believe that wouldn't work, because the context is different, because the time is different, because the place is different, because the people is different right now. And even, I will add this as well, even right now, different parts of the Muslim world has got different setting. So we cannot have a model which works, for example, in Indonesia, and at the same time it works in Saudi Arabia. There are two different cultural backgrounds, two different economic configuration, that all those things should be taken into consideration, and then we can move from there to see what will work best at the time, at a specific time and place.
I hope the answer for Ubaidillah. Yusuf Habibi has a response regarding his previous question. He said that he often heard that Iranians often blame the socio-political problem in their country because of Islam, and that they want to back to the Persian era, the golden Persian era. In such condition, in today's Iranian condition, is it possible for such group emerge from that discontent?
Yeah, I think that's one of this is again another good question, I believe. Look, in Iran, there are three kinds of cultures, or I don't know, we call it civilization, which are in competition in a way. One is the Islamic, obviously, which now is in charge. The other one is nationalistic, which goes back to the Persian Empire and the old history of the Persia. And the third one is the Western or global phenomena, some of Western civilization. And now the understanding is that there is no conflict between Western civilization and the Persian nationalistic approach, and that's the problem that is Islam. I think there are some truths in that. The problem is in Islam, in a way, not in Islam, but one is specific interpretation, understanding of Islam. And that is the version that Khomeini introduced and now is in charge has been in charge for the last 4 decades. If we look again back to the history, we will see that Islam and religious authorities have made significant, positive, constructive contribution to the politics. A good example is the constitutional revolution, during which the ulama, most of the ulamas, Akhund Khorasani, Tabrizi, and many of the ulamas from Najaf and from Tehran, from Iran, they contributed to the revolution. They justified another good example is Allama Naini, who wrote a book, Tanbihul Ummah, which justifies using religious scripture, justifies parliamentarism, supports parliamentarism. That was the time that the parliament was introduced to the Iranian politics. So the problem is in Islam, but a specific version of Islam, a specific understanding of Islam, which is no doubt offers an authoritarian political system, which doesn't tolerate not only different kinds of policies or ideologies within the political sphere, but within the religious context suppresses different understanding. In the Western context, there have been lots of talks about that, how different political groups, like leftist groups, like nationalists, like liberals, Democrats, secular groups have been suppressed over the last 4 decades, which is true. There's no doubt that the Islamic State, this authoritarian reading of religion, have suppressed all these political ideologies. But at the same time, if we look to the religious context, religious authorities, those who have remained independent from the state, those who have had different understanding of religion, who have promoted more democratic, more tolerant understanding of religion, they have suffered as well. They have been suppressed as well. If you look to right now to the prisons, those political prisoners, you will find out many religious authorities, religious scholars who are imprisoned by the Islamic State in Iran. So, again, as I said, the backlash to the top-down secularization, what was emergence of this state-centric Shiism. And unfortunately, now because they are posing some sort of what I would say top-down Islamization, okay, we had top-down secularization before revolution, before 1979, and from 1979 there has been this top-down brutal Islamization policies in Iran. Now there is a backlash emerging to that top-down Islamization, and that is emerging in form of nationalism. I would say somehow it is a source of concern, at least for me, because again, we don't understand well what kind of nationalism we are taking. Everybody in Iran, most of the people think of as a golden age of Persian Empire, but they don't really understand what happened, what was the different aspect. It was just because it was an empire. Of course, there were good things and bad things as well, but because of just resisting or rejecting the Islamic State, they are striving to something which they don't have a clear idea about it. And unfortunately, one very negative element in that sort of nationalism is the racism. And they think that we are better than other races. Iranians are more intelligent and they have this history. This is not what I personally, in spite of being Iranian, I'm not proud of it. I don't think that it's a very constructive idea. And like any other nations, Iranian has got good, bad, and all combination of everything in their history, in their current time, and in the future as well. Nothing distinguishes us from the rest of the thing. But there is this strong element in that sort of nationalism that we are a distinguished nation. We have had this glorious age because we deserve to be like an empire. And that's not something that I would be happy about.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Naser. I think regarding your explanation about what happened in Iran, and also goes back to the topic of secularism. I don't know if it's part of your area of expertise or not, but when we come to talk about that the religion is pushed back, but it can never be truly disappear in this big project of secularism. It seems that people are actually looking for a strong grip, for a moral guidance or an identity, and religion, Islam, as we discussed here, can provide something like that, can provide a set of moral, a set of values, and a set of identity that can bring people together. It's something that the big secularism project could not erase, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's the matter of identity mostly, and of course, more than identity, people need religion. I mean, look, there are difficult times in the life that not everybody can live with the idea that there is no one out there to protect me. There is nothing. Life is not just, and that the one big problem is that there are many unjust and unfair things happening. And if we don't, for most of people, of course, not everybody, if they don't think that there will be one day, the judgment day, that there will be just over there, it's not easy to tolerate, to live with this situation that with many of the difficulties, suffering, and problems. And I think that the idea, and most of Peter Berger is a good example, that who specifically said that we were all wrong, we got it wrong, we were mistaken, that religion will go away. People need religion, and it's going to be, as long as there is a human being, there will be different kinds of religion. But maybe what has happened, I would agree with Jose Casanova, there is a pluralism of religion. Instead of one kind of religion, like the church, in Catholic Church, controlling all aspects of the life, being in charge and being able to mobilize millions of people, there are diverse understanding now. There are different kinds of religion, and that pluralism weakens the religious establishments, religious institutions, because they lose their power of mobilizing millions of people, because people has chosen different kinds of religion in a society.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Naser, for the enlightening explanation. Yeah. Wow, time passing by so fast. It's already 2 p.m.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yes, we hope to meet you on another occasion, and wish you luck with your research projects and teaching, and may you always stay healthy.
Yeah, thanks Maricha for organizing this, and thanks everybody else to attending, and particularly those who asked very interesting questions. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Terima kasih untuk teman-teman yang sudah